Actually, we had a call-in user, Supervisor Jacobson called in.
Yep.
Let me try it real quick.
You can kick me out.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Public comment, we have two public comments today. Start with Mr. Gravine, you will be allotted 7.5 minutes, and then Mr. Decker, he will be 7.5 minutes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Gravine. I live in the Village of Maine. I live at 1650 Auger Drive, and the reason I'm here is because of what the county is looking at with the emergency medical service. I didn't notice on the agenda last month, apparently was on there last month too. And this month it's on there again too about looking into feasibility study for the EMS/fire. So, you know, the reason I'm here is we, in the Village of Maine, we have a very good fire department, and it's volunteers. And a really important part of that fire department is our first responders. They are there before the ambulance even arrives. And, you know, everybody knows the most important time is when it happens, and the faster you can get there, the better off it is. So when you look at this study, make sure that you keep in mind that we need those first responders because they are a very, in my opinion, a very important part of our department. You know, and if you're going to be eliminating or looking at possibly getting rid of volunteer fire departments, and I think we would be doing a disservice to the community, to our, we're in the rural area. These people live out there, these first responders, and they're there, and they're good. In the Village of Maine, I just looked at the report. They average between 160 and 180 calls a year. To me, the first responders are just important, if not more important, than the fire department. You know, the first responders are there alone, okay, with the ambulances on their way. You know, with the fire department, yeah, they're important too, you know, and they're all there to save lives. So I just wanted to make sure that the first responders don't get forgotten. It's such a, I know I have some property in the town of Texas too, and I know a few people out there, and the first responders do a wonderful job out there too. So that's the only thing I wanted to really say.
Thank you, Mr. Gravine. All right, then we have Mr. Decker, 7.5 minutes. All right, he has declined to comment. All right, thank you. We will go to 3, approval of the February 2nd, 2022 Public Safety Committee meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Supervisor Mask. Do I have a second?
Lamont.
Second by Lamont. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. What I think I'm going to do then, I was going to jump to 6A because the other stuff is probably going to take the most time here today. So if it's okay with the body, I would like to jump to 6A. Never mind, I'm not going to do 6A. All right. 4, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. Discuss if a countywide EMS fire feasibility study should be a priority on the administrator's 2022 work plan. I did talk with Lance earlier today about that. For the people that have not been, I saw Gene was at the meeting, and with regarding the county administrator's work plan, it is in your packet now if everyone wants to take a look. There's quite a bit on his work plan already. Now, that being said, I think this possibly could be put on his work plan to see which direction we want to go. But I was also going to be asking people today, if, they should have looked at the work plan anyway because it's coming to the county board. There's a lot on here, and I guess I will let Lance kind of sum up what he feels, and I'll follow up what happened at the executive committee meeting, because in the past, we've typically said, oh yeah, these are what we're going to focus on. And now I think, no, I'm not positive because we got to go back to the executive committee, we're going to kind of prioritize top to bottom, or things we have to get done, things that should try to get done, and things that are kind of low on the totem pole. But we don't know that yet, I guess, is the way I will phrase this before Lance speaks, because the executive committee kind of went different directions on this at the last meeting. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Lance.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following up on what Chair Boots referenced, as I understand the executive committee's work that they're going to undertake, what they asked me to do to assist them is to go through the draft work plan that is in your packet and that I emailed to each of you earlier today, and identify those projects that, from my perspective as your administrator, are things that need to be moved forward, that are already underway, that really, from an operations perspective, cannot be stopped without having significant negative ancillary effects. Identifying those within the document, and then also identifying those things that are either new projects or that, from my perspective, could be moved away from without significant negative impact, and then giving that information to the executive committee to try to assist them in prioritizing the items on that work plan document. So that's the background that Chair Boots was referencing relative to the executive committee's work relative to the work plan. With respect to the specific item before you regarding whether or not a countywide feasibility study should be a priority within that work plan, again, this really stems from the presentation that was made at your last meeting, which really was twofold. Emergency Management Director Phil Rentmeester provided a bit of an overview of a couple of projects that had been undertaken through the University Year Partnership with the University of Wisconsin. And then also you had a request from 2 community members relative to a potential desire to have the county look at a countywide EMS feasibility study. And I understand that it indicates EMS/fire in the document, and part of the reason that a feasibility study, if it's undertaken, I would at least have some research done relative to fire feasibility, is really that from my initial review, and I know Mike is here from Corp Counsel, but from my initial review, it's unclear to me that the county has, it's unclear to me what the county's role could be statutorily with regard to the delivery of fire service. It's more clear to me what the potential role could be for the county relative to the provision of emergency medical services, because under the statutes, and this was referenced at your last meeting, under the statutes, one of the things that the county can provide for, specifically under section 66.0602, is that the county does have the ability to levy, to tax for the provision of emergency medical services, and that's an exception to the levy limit that would otherwise apply. That said, it's not clear to me what countywide EMS service could be or should be if Marathon County were to undertake that analysis. In my mind, that's what the feasibility study would look at, which is, again, Phil referenced in his last presentation, as did Mr. Langenhahn and Mr. Maloney, that there are several counties in the state of Wisconsin that do have some form of countywide emergency medical services, and that can be provided in a number of different ways. The one that they referenced was Waushara County, which, as I understand that service, it's provided directly by Waushara County employees. They have a director of that department. They have capital expenses relative to facility locations, and they have ambulances stationed at those facility locations throughout Waushara County, and they provide that service directly. I also understand, and my frame of knowledge here isn't overly deep, but I do understand that there's at least another county that county-wide system is accomplished more through a contractual obligation or a contractual mechanism with already existing services. So I'm not clear what countywide means or could mean for Marathon County, but that would be what the feasibility study would look into, is whether or not it makes sense. And if it does make sense, what that delivery mechanism may look like. So the question really that the executive committee was looking for, and I think that this body, based on your conversation at your last meeting, wanted to discuss, is whether or not this feasibility study, taking that next step, is something that the committee believes should be a priority in 2022.
So just to expand upon that, per what Lance just said, per Mr. Gravine's comments, so some of the things we were seeing, he is correct. The Village of Maine has a very good EMS program. What we were looking at for the feasibility study, in my mind, is there are certain areas in the county that are underserved by EMS. We talked about show-up times, like you said, of 10 minutes, which is acceptable. There's certain areas where Mr. Langenhahn was saying up to 28, 30 minutes before somebody even showed up on scene. So I think that's what the study would look at, is where are we underserved, how could we better serve, things like that. I guess what I'm asking for this board is, you have the administrator's work plan, you see where we're at with that. What would we like to see? First of all, are we going to put this on his work plan? And then second of all, we kind of had discussions at the executive committee, like what are our priorities now on that work plan? Because in the past, we would do the work plan, and then they'd say, well, go back to your committee and see which ones are the priorities. And what would happen is all the priorities coming out of the committees were, if you were on the public safety committee, yours were the highest priority. If you're on the health and human services, yours are the biggest priority. And we need to be better at looking at a holistic view of that. So with that being said, I guess I'd open it up for discussion on if we should be putting this on his work plan so that he can report back to us of what he thinks we should be doing.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead,
Bruce
please.
Lamont. Thanks. According to Langenhahn, there are some that have some 20-minute response times or whatever. I mean, how many are we talking? Is that a rare case, or do we have a general idea? And can that be met in other ways in the short term, or how is it being met? Thanks.
Lance said he would take this one.
Sure. Supervisor Lamont, I think this answer probably isn't going to be exactly what you were searching for, but I think that's part of the thing we would look at through the feasibility study, to see what those response times are, to try to understand, first and foremost, is this something that the county, in pursuit of our vision to be the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous, something that really makes sense? In short, do we have an issue here or not? I know that the sheriff's office, particularly the communications division, has made some changes over the last several years to their processes to reduce some of those longer wait times. And what's coming to mind is I know we made a change in our dispatch process in the event that our initial dispatch to the initial organization for response wasn't received or returned and that they were responding. We shortened the period of time between that initial dispatch to our secondary dispatch location. And I know Mr. Milhausen here, Captain Milhausen is here to, if you do want additional detail, if you think that's necessary at this point. But the short answer is, I think that's what we'd look at in that feasibility study, is to better understand the scope of the problem, the scope of those underserved areas that Chair Boots referenced, trying to identify those.
How big of a program or an evaluation would that be? How long would it take? How much would it cost? Can we use ARPA money for it, or?
Those are all really good questions. I don't know what I would take the time. Part of the work, if it's on the work plan, is I'd work to develop an RFP. And I did some preliminary work. In fact, Phil did. He started to put together what a request for proposal might look like to examine the current state of emergency medical response. But I won't really know what the cost of that study would be until I put that out for proposals and we get the responses that we receive. We do have a couple of vendors that we again, in part of our preliminary work, that we started to identify that may be interested in responding to that request for proposal. And one of the individuals that Mr. Langenhan referenced, the individual from Waushara County, I do understand that that individual has historically done some requests for proposal response work, but there are other vendors that we would turn to. But until we get those, until we put that out for proposal, and until we receive the proposals with the cost information within them, I really don't feel comfortable giving you an explanation of, or taking a stance on how much that's going to be.
Do I remember right that at the last meeting, the two guys that presented said it's been going on for like 20 years? They've been trying to get this evaluated, or is that?
Well, what I can tell you is I've had conversations with Mr. Langenhan extensively, basically because I was a chair for 10 years. He's been a chair out in Marathon for, I don't know, long time, way longer than I was a chair. But there's not all municipalities, not all rural communities, I guess I would say, have issues, but depending on which one you're in, like I just mentioned, I know Maine has a really strong fire department / EMS. I'm not going to mention who I think. I mean, it depends on the community. And what you see is a rolling stock. If it's, these are volunteers. So if there's not a volunteer, that's where your gap becomes. And if you have volunteers that work during the day and something happens during the day, there's some issues. So that's what you're seeing. I mean, it's not like these are not full-time employees for the most part. I know depending on which township you go, some, like the chief could be paid a pretty substantial amount, and there's more put on them. But if you have these smaller townships where you got 400 or 500 people in a township, your EMS is not going to be the same as, let's say, a village or a larger township. So there's, like Lance was saying, with the feasibility study, you would look at where is the underserved, things like that, because that's why a problem 20 years, because it's a rolling thing. Well, we had, even in the town of Texas, we had a really strong fire department. Then as the generation was getting out of there that started the fire department, they left. Well, now you have younger guys coming in. There was kind of a gap there for a little while. Now they're doing good again. It's just, that's how the rural communities kind of operate, because it's all volunteer. So that's the problem in EMS. And I mean, in my mind, EMS and firefighting are completely different animals. You're going to have probably 25, 30 guys there for a fire, where EMS is more, how many fires you're going to have a year, 5, 10, where you're going to have 100, 120 EMS calls. So there's a big difference.
This is Supervisor Mask.
Go ahead, Supervisor Mask.
Thank you. I agree that I think this study would be a really good idea. I've gotten a lot of complaints from my soon-to-be-gone rural district about people waiting too long for an ambulance, and it's hearsay, so I wasn't there firsthand, so I don't know. I really think that this is important. And what Mr. Gravine said about our first responders is equally important, because there's a case that happened not all that long ago where one of our now retired first responders had a defibrillator in his car, and he was out for a fish fry, and somebody had a heart attack, and he saved his life. And so we need to keep all this into perspective, that these people are doing frontline work, the first responders and the EMS. And the EMS, it seems to me that depending on their level of training, are really expected to have, are expected to be able to do more, and they can only do just so much. They're not doctors. But we really need to stay on top of this, because I do believe with an aging population, myself included, in Marathon County, we are going to have increased calls, and to have good service with qualified people, and especially in the underserved areas, is really important. And I would totally support a feasibility study. And I know that Phil would be and very good at facilitating a lot of this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Jacobson.
Go ahead, Supervisor Jacobson.
I'm going to just take kind of a contrary view here. I agree that, it's always good to get information, and perhaps that's what this study would provide. But looking at everything that's on the administrator's work plan, which seems daunting to me, I don't believe that this should be one of his top priorities right now among the other things that he has to deal with. I've got a lot of questions and concerns about this. Not to put the cart before the horse, but regardless of what the feasibility study would show, if the county's role in EMS is to basically provide that service, the expense is astronomical. I mean, I have chaired a multi-district fire department for several years, sat on the board for several years that I wasn't chair, still sit on the board. I deal with their budget every year. The cost of providing this service is considerable, and I think before the county jumps into this, I think there needs to be a better discussion, particularly among some of the townships that have longer response times, as to how they can better partner with local fire districts that are already in the area, whether that be Safer, whether that be Riverside, whether that be Mosinee. Because when the county jumps into this and the tax levy that it's going to undertake, what's going to happen to those local districts that are already providing service? Are they going to go away? Are residents going to get double charged because now they're paying for protection within their local community, then they're paying a tax to the county? I have concerns about local governments losing control over their budgets if they turn service over to the county. And I agree with one of the things that Supervisor, Mr. Chair, that you mentioned, with fire being a completely different animal. That we've talked about EMS, and then all of a sudden we keep talking about fire. I have a lot of concern about looking at this going beyond EMS and consolidating fire with it. Those are my concerns. I don't know that Waushara County is a great example. I mean, Waushara County is, by my look on the internet, 637, square miles compared to Marathon County, which is bigger than the state of Rhode Island. So you're talking about a whole different animal in that respect. So for all those reasons, I just think right now, with everything on Administrator Leonard's list, that this just shouldn't be one of the items.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Lamont, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion, if I could, that we would have this taken off the administrator's work plan for now.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Jacobson. I'll second.
Further discussion? I guess the one comment I would say is if we do decide to run this way, I don't have an issue with it, I guess. I would say that I still think we need to be looking into it though. So at this point, I guess with the, depending on how this vote goes with the bidding of the committee, would you be all right with me still sitting down with Mr. Langenhahn and the other entities and still keep this moving forward? Because I do still think we need to look at it at least.
I think you're right. I think we do need to keep looking at it.
I agree.
Yeah, this is Supervisor Jacobson, and I don't mean to suggest it's not something to look at. Like I said, I am somebody who makes decisions on facts, and I certainly always appreciate having facts. But my comments are more directed to I don't think it should be one of his top 5 things he's focusing on right now on his list.
Okay, understandable. So with that, any further comment? Go ahead, Mr.
This is Administrator Leonard. So I'm sure I didn't capture the exact phraseology of the motion, but based on the last couple minutes of discussion, do I correctly understand that, there's general consensus that it should be on the work plan but not prioritized, as opposed to something that county administration shouldn't at least be aware of or involved in additional discussions?
I can make my motion more clear, that it would stay on the work plan, but not be the top priority.
I'll second.
Okay, so for the clarification, it would go on the work plan, but be a lower priority per this committee.
Right, because otherwise we're saying public safety isn't important.
All right, with that being said, all in favor to the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion
I
carried.
would have if he hadn't changed it.
Motion carried. And then also on this topic, we are going to be discussing the work plan at the next executive meeting. Obviously, Gene and myself will be there. If Brent or Lamont have anything that they would like to see prioritized on there, please either email me or talk to me personally to let me know what you think should be a priority or whatever you think. I mean, otherwise I'm going to go there with what I think what I feel our committee would say is a priority, but I will look for your guidance on that if need be. All right.
Where specifically, Matt, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Where specifically was this in the work plan? Because I looked in the minutes.
It's not on the work plan, but per our last meeting, we talked about it being on the work plan, so that's why it was on the agenda.
Okay, because then I got the thing from Lance today, and I thought maybe it's supposed to be on that too, but yeah, I didn't see it on either.
Yeah, I actually talked with Lance earlier today and asked him to email that, so you guys seen what was on the work plan, and then Tasha put it in the packet also.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
Yep. All right, then we will move to operational functions required by statute, ordinance, or resolution. We have none. 6, educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, results of the recent jail inspection by State of Wisconsin Department of Corrections. Just shake it.
Testing. Excellent. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to you all today. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to see a jail inspection prior, the jail is inspected by the Department of Corrections annually. The reason for that is twofold, really. First, to assess compliance and identify any deficiencies that are associated with DOC governing documents, which would be Wisconsin Department of Corrections Code 350, and then Wisconsin statutes, as you see in the headline 301.37 sub 3. One of the goals, since I've been the jail administrator in 2013, the end of 2013, was to really work on correcting deficiencies and move the jail into more offensive light when it came to the daily operations versus the defense, trying to play catch up, things like that. So going through the document, you'll see that we had a number of operational changes. Of course, we were wildly continuing to be impacted by COVID, but during that time, we were continually able to make updates that were required or suggested along the way. Most importantly to me is not what we've done, but what we're going to do, and so that's under goals and initiatives. So you'll notice that the annual inspection was actually done in August of 2021. It does not typically take 5 or 6 months for us to get the inspection back, but for reasons out of the control of our inspector, which include other jails being built and things like that. Wood County, for example, has a new project. She did take a little bit longer this time to get back to us. But so of those goals and objectives, there were 11, and we have acted on all except for 2. So the only ones that we do not have any plan in place for currently are the implementation of scanning for inmates with ID cards or bracelets, and then the implementation of the creative pretrial prep program. Those are pretty lofty and expensive and have really been continually inhibited by COVID. So we are hoping that that will be a long-term goal and initiative, but other than that, we are on our way in every other aspect. The only other change under goals and initiatives is we currently need to hire 8 correctional officers instead of 3. Going to the code violations, there were no violations, but again, they take best practice and give recommendations for what we could do better. And so that's what you will see. I do agree with most of the things that she said. We do have a newer inspector, and I have been doing this for 23 years. So, for example, at the bottom where she says, administrative confinement review should occur every 7 days. I say 7 calendar days because I don't work on the weekends. And she says, or I say 7 working days, she says 7 calendar days. So she did write that in there, but again, not a deficiency, just a change or a difference in perspective. So otherwise, I will tell you that you have a jail staff that is second to none. They are willing to do literally every single thing that is handed to them, and it has been a tough year. 2022 has not handed us a lot of leeway when it comes to staffing and people with mental health issues and opportunities for growth, but they are handling it well. And you all as community members, committee members, etc., should be very proud of them.
Thank you. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as Sandra referenced, there is a statute that actually requires the county board to have the evaluation, that inspection done on an annual basis. So pursuant to that statute, it's being presented to you today. I will say that I just sent the email that actually contained that document to all of you, and it's being uploaded in the packet at this exact time. So if you do have any questions at a later date, we certainly can have Sandra come back, but there is a statutory requirement under Chapter 59 that in addition to the many other obligations that the county board has relative to delivery of service for things such as mental health services or child protection, you do have the requirement relative to the annual inspection of the jail that report be provided to you.
There is some belief that there is also a requirement for county board members to tour the jail on an annual basis. So I welcome and encourage any of you that would like to see what is being done to feel free to make an appointment with me.
So Sandra, since you're here right now and you said that, we're going to have a new board coming in, and there's been discussions that I've had with supervisors about the new incoming board. So I think that's something we should do for sure. Public safety for sure needs to go through and do a tour of the jail. So that's something we should set up in, I would say, May or June.
Sure, a couple of years ago, I remember now Mayor Katie came in on Memorial Day, and I made the trek in myself to give her that tour, just so that she could do it on a day that she had the opportunity. So I'm more than happy.
Well, we could plan it as part of our meeting at the end of the meeting. Oh, I say we, assuming we're going to be here.
Correct. That's what I'm kind of getting at. I think we should do a tour as a meeting. Correct. Because
Yeah.
I can tell you that I've only toured the jail once, and it was, again, one-on-one, and I think we take a lot of extra time from people, where if we just did it all at the same time, we wouldn't have to take a lot of their resources away, because they're struggling for resources as is, so that's a great idea.
Yeah, the last one was when the jail was being repaired, and then the previous one for me was at the end of the deputy shift that I was riding with at like 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. And that was amazing how many people were being booked at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night.
I used to do jail services, so I've been there quite a few times, but not recently.
Yesterday, we had 5 people on suicide watch. 2 of them were yelling very loudly all afternoon. 1 was confined to a restraint chair, and 1 was transported to the hospital for a significant head injury. So I would have invited you in yesterday had you have liked to seen it.
Oh my God. How do you keep your staff healthy?
So just like you would normally see in law enforcement, if you were to work with them out on a scene, for example, the staff is very well connected. They are not only a team, but a family. They take care of one another. We have the opportunity to have what they call POST. It's a peer support program. That was recently kind of reinvigorated by the sheriff's office, and there were a number of my staff that were interested and have decided to take part in that. So that is another way. We make certain that they know that we care for them as employees. I mean, if I had the ability to write checks or give extra days off or things like that, sometimes that they have in the private sector, they know that they certainly would get that, and that sometimes is enough to keep them going. We preach our culture and our core values, and we expect everybody to have good behavior and professionalism and stand up or live up to those expectations, which creates a good working environment for them. We do training every year. Some of it is mental health, some of it is personal health or growth, some of it is the statutorily required training. So we offer that, but really it's finding good people on the front end, which is sometimes why you see the numbers so large, and then really working to make sure that we're able to retain those people through not only wages and benefits, but also through their relationships.
Thank you.
Do you know, Mr. Chairman, if there's anything done to appreciate those folks in the community, like we do with the firefighters, people bring in pizza or donuts or stuff?
So every year in May, there's an annual corrections week. The sheriff's office does provide like a pizza party or something like that for each shift. Each one of my team members will actually bring things in for their own shift. Again, it's like a family. I think this week was a really rough week in the jail. There were donuts at least 3 days in a row. So food is always a good thing. Just in the last few weeks, we've gotten mugs. That is something that we do not very often, once every few years. So they really appreciate those small gestures. A couple of years ago, they were able to make their own challenge coin, so they designed it and we had it printed. So they have a challenge coin, which means they're part of the team. For people who don't understand or know what challenge coins are, it does stem from the military use of the challenge coin. So we do a few things. I mean, you know, we all have the parameters we have to work in and be respectful of our community dollars, but we certainly do try our best.
Well, the organization I have a challenge coin for, if I don't have it on me, I owe somebody a drink.
Go ahead, Administrator Leonard.
Just to add to that explanation that Sandra gave, I think one of the most powerful things that it's been my experience that the Sheriff's Office does exceedingly well, and you saw it recently at a previous meeting, is when people do go above and beyond, we try to recognize the difficult position that our law enforcement and our corrections officers are involved in, and the challenges that they face. So the recognition opportunities and appreciation opportunities that those members have to come before this committee currently. But in the past, you'll remember pre-pandemic, we'd have some of those things in front of the full county board to really demonstrate that strong culture of appreciation that Sandra referenced. And I think there's certainly going to be some opportunities to move back in that direction. And my hope was to engage the county board in doing that on some additional occasions. I also think the opportunity to have the committee walk through the jail as set forth in the report that Sandra referenced and as in the statute, take that opportunity to show the appreciation through those tours, I think is important. And then, like Sandra referenced, just continuing to take the opportunity to try to find new and innovative ways to create that strong culture, that strong team, are all things that are outside of what you might traditionally think about, which is compensation and benefits. Not to say those aren't important. You'll hear from us shortly on some changes we need to make there as well. But there's a lot of pieces that go into maintaining the strong workforce that we have, and particularly now in the environment that we're all existing in relative to the labor market. Those are some real challenges that make all of those pieces very important.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I do have a question.
ahead.
You just mentioned staffing, and Sandra mentioned staffing, that she would have to, according to the inspection, hire 8 correctional officers instead of 3. I'm assuming retention is not a big issue in the jail, but do you recruit from the NTC program, or where do you recruit from? Remind me. I should know this, and I don't remember.
So actually, retention is a very big deal in the jail right now, unfortunately. We have this week lost one to Canadian National Railroad for a significant amount of money, and one to the Tomahawk Paper Mill. He'll be starting at $25 an hour, and after 3 months, will be making $28 an hour. That is more than top pay for someone who's been here their entire career, starting. So we recruit, the NTC program is generally running either recruits that are law enforcement or recruits that are corrections but have already been hired by an agency. So you don't see a lot of recruits that are not spoken for, so to speak, out of the technical college program anymore. There are usually maybe 1 or 2 in a class, but not necessarily, 6 or a hand or more than that one. We have recently started looking at using Indeed, so it's a little bit different than the current system where you look to the county and say, hey, do you have any openings? Oh, sure, I want to apply. This one kind of does a little bit more of a headhunting type. You clicked on it, you're interested in it, you upload your resume, and then we reach out to them, which is very indicative of the way things are working in the private world. I've gotten a couple of cold calls and texts from randomizers saying, oh, by the way, hey, would you like to come work for us? And I've not looked for a job. Maybe that means something. I don't know. Maybe I'm supposed to be. I'm not sure. But so we are the Chief Billup is working to kind of initiate a plan for doing a little bit more visibility when it comes to our entire Corrections and Communications Division especially, but the entire sheriff's office. And I think that we have some opportunity there, but really it's looking, it's a difficult situation because when people have to work, 3 days a week and they're making as much money as somebody who has to work 5 and get spit on or have to save lives or all of those things without some of the glory, it's difficult to compete with. So hope that answered your question.
Oh, definitely. I respect what you do and what your staff does. I couldn't do it. And I'll be the first to admit it. So I have a lot of respect for all of you. Thank you.
So getting a little off topic, but I did have a conversation with
Yep.
Administrator Leonard. I'm following in with what you were saying, Gene, is as your NACO delegate, I did go to a workshop on getting talent in the counties. And there's some things that we're probably going to be looking at, or I think that we're going to be guiding administration to look at, and I think they're already on top of it. But both the WCA and NACO are looking at alternative ways to get talent and to get the young generation working in counties. So that is something, just so you're aware, that you'll be hearing in the next couple months. So just kind of throwing that out there. Anything further on this? All right, thank you. We'll go at next meeting. Time, location, announcements, and agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. And then 6C, next meeting is Wednesday, April 6th at 1:30. Anything else that we have? All right, then I will take number 7.
Move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn by Supervisor Mask. Can I second?
Jacobson, second.
Jacobson, second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carried. Thank you, everyone.